What I'd like to talk about today is something that I was reminded of when I read something yesterday. It reminded me of a video that I had seen a little while ago. And in this video, there was some footage which had been recorded. And it's not exactly clear to me when that was, but I'm guessing that it was probably sometime in the late 90s or maybe early 2000s. And it was footage of a financier. And this financier was speaking about his recollections of a time when he and a group of other financiers had made the decision that they were going to rescue Donald Trump from some financial debt that he had. This guy was talking about just a matter of fact that they had decided to bail him out or pay off his debts or rescue him from them or annul those debts in some way. Now, the phrase he used to say that they had made this decision, that they were going to do it, to explain their rationale, to explain their thinking and their reasoning and how it was of benefit to them to do this, was that, in their opinion, Donald Trump was better off alive than dead. Now, this might seem like a very strange way of putting it and also might give people cause for concern, but it's pretty clear from the context that, although there might be nuances to this, that what he meant by this was that if Donald Trump was broke, if he had no money, then he was no longer effectively alive in their world. He didn't matter. He was insignificant. If you like, he was no longer a player in the game of life. It's an interesting side note to realize that the implication of this is that any one of us who don't have any significant amount of money, we don't matter to them. We don't count. They effectively see us as being people who are dead. So the vast majority of the people, whether we want to use phraseology like the 99% or that kind of a thing, they look at the majority of the world's population as people who not only are effectively dead to them, but they don't see us as a threat because we don't have any money, we don't have any power, we don't have any influence. And I think another little insight then as well is the realization that, they don't necessarily love money. Money is not necessarily their main objective. It's just a means to an end, which is going to sound maybe at first like, oh, that's a bit of a relief then. They don't just do everything for the love of money. They aren't purely greedy people. They aren't motivated only by money. Unfortunately, I think it's kind of worse than that, because the assumption that a lot of people make is that, oh, if I would have money, then I would be happy. That's all I would need. But money is of no use. It's only a representation of what it can do for you, what it can buy you, what doors it can open for you. A lot of people see it as money as being a stored type of energy that you can use at some point in the future then, whenever there is something that you would like to wield that energy upon. And energy is used to get things done, to create things, to move things, and so on. So what he's talking about here is that somebody is dead if they can't influence somebody else. So if they can't influence somebody else, they have no power over them. Now, governments talk quite openly about the fact that they use taxation. In other words, they use the idea that they will remove money from you if you do certain things. So people will say, okay, I will not do that thing, and then you won't take the money. So governments then are quite happy, in a way, to not receive certain money as long as they've influenced your behavior, or as long as they've disincentivized you to do certain things that they don't want you to do. So a big purpose of taxation is not just to put money in the coffers of government, but in fact to either coerce people to engage in certain behaviors or to strongly dissuade people from engaging in other behaviors. So it's a control mechanism, and these people are well aware of this. So he was of the opinion, and he said that he and his group of people, his consortium of financiers, were of the opinion that Donald Trump was a man who had the ability to influence people. Perhaps they felt that he was charismatic. Perhaps they felt that, like in the game of life, he was a piece or a player in the game of life that they felt was better on the board than not. And maybe they felt that they didn't necessarily have any particular use for his influence, but that it would be prudent or wise to hold him in reserve for a time when maybe they would. Now, don't get me wrong here. I am not going down the road of saying, oh, so what we're looking at here is somebody who is not an independent person, who is free to do whatever it is that he'd like to do. He acts in an independent manner in accordance with his own conscience. Unfortunately, the realization does become fairly inevitable that at the very least he may have owed one favour to one group of people, and that best case scenario, he fulfilled the repayment of that one favour, and that's all that was ever asked of him, and it wasn't something that was particularly injurious to anybody or that ran contrary to anything that would be of benefit to the people in the United States, or the world for that matter. Let's just leave that to one side for the moment, because what I want to get to here is the idea that people are characters or players on a stage, and that the way that they can influence people is a currency, is very valuable, and that's one of the commodities that money can buy. So they saw value in him, and that's why they felt that it was a good investment of their money to put into him. Now, maybe they didn't even have to use money to give to him so that he could give to somebody else to pay off his debts. Maybe these people were actually in the business world, and maybe they knew the people who he owed money to. Maybe the people who he owed money to were actually part of their consortium. Maybe they were just simply able to write it off. If not, maybe they were able to, as a group of powerful and rich people, go to this other group of people and say, you know, we've worked together before, we'd like to work together again in the future. We'd take it as a personal favour if you would see your way clear to writing off these debts, perhaps. And maybe that's all there was to it from their end. And then it's anybody's guess as to the implications of that. But as I say, I'd rather leave that for now, because I'm not trying to tell people, hey, you shouldn't put your faith in this guy here, don't believe what he says because this, that and the other. That is a logical consequence of it, at least to some extent. But what I'd like to say is there's pretty much nobody. In fact, I'll go so far as to say, I won't hedge my bets here and say pretty much. I'll just say, show me a person who is not compromised in some way. And then we can say, look, maybe that person is the second coming. That person is pure of heart. That's somebody we can all put our collective hopes in. But I'm cautioning against doing this. I'm saying that we shouldn't all place our faith in one person, because each human being is fallible. Each human being is subject to not only making mistakes, but they're subject to being influenced in ways that maybe they don't even realize themselves. And that leads me back to what I'm trying to get to in my main point, which is everybody can influence everybody else, sometimes in ways they don't realize. Sometimes their intention is to influence people in certain ways and to certain behaviors. And we know that there are people who can pull the strings of other people, puppet masters perhaps. But I'd like to use that analogy to take you back to a time when there were things like Punch and Judy shows, little puppets, marionettes that had strings attached to them, and they were all controlled by the same person. And as children we realized this. We knew that we were suspending disbelief. We knew that we were watching these figurines or characters in some kind of little theatre, and we would have our emotions led or drawn in some way or another. But at the same time, we knew it was all make-believe. Now, at the time of recording, it's coming up to a time where it's not too far away from Christmas, and I don't know if you're like me and you had a childhood where occasionally you might go to what was known as a Christmas play. Now, in these plays, there would be very cliched characters, very stereotypical characters, things like the wicked stepmother, or there'd be an evil sorcerer, some kind of wicked witch, or some kind of warlock or evil wizard. And when they would come on stage, it would be typically between periods when the main characters would leave the stage momentarily and there'd be a set change, but in between, these stereotypical evil characters would come on stage and we'd all go, boo, oh boo. Now, as children, we realized that these were just actors. They were inhabiting roles. They were people that were known to us in our community. So we knew that they weren't real. But at the same time, we invested our energies in directing our hate towards these characters. And then when the main characters would come back on stage, they'd say something like, "Oh, did something happen while I was gone? Did you see somebody?" And we go, "Yes, yeah, he was just here a minute ago. Didn't you see him?" So again, we enjoyed the fact that this was it was a game. It was audience participation, and we were being involved in this play of theatrics. And even as children, even though we were desperately trying to say, look, there he is, and the evil character would poke his head around the curtain again. We go, look behind you. And you go, where, this way? And he'd turn around and he'd look in the wrong direction. We go, no, the other way. And we were getting, we were being played like fiddles, really, because our emotions were being wound up. And we're saying, no, don't you realize you keep looking the wrong way? Look over there. And maybe, even some of us would sort of say, look, I mean, if you would just go backstage, I'm sure you'd find him there. So, I mean, it's clearly ridiculous. But you can forgive children. But what you can't forgive is adults falling for the same trick. Because just like the children we understand that this is all theatrics. We know that it's real people who play these roles on TV, in the media, on the internet. We understand that it's just a game, but at the same time, we invest so much of our emotions in it. But, that's not the worst thing, because if that's all it was, then it would be misdirecting our energies. And that's pretty bad as it is. Now, what I'm going to say here, and I'm going to try and make this a concluding point, but I want to preface it by saying, please don't misunderstand me, because this is not, what I'm about to say here, it's not an appeal to some kind of peace and love centrism. No. Again, maybe what I'll say is, it sounds a little bit pithy, but I'll say it here. There is no left or right. There is no conservative or liberal. There is no red or blue. There's only right or wrong. It always bothered me. I could never understand how it could be that somebody could say, I align with a certain party, and just know that every single thing that they think on every particular topic, every particular principle, every particular moral, that one particular institution, one particular group would align perfectly with everything. It just never works. It couldn't work that way. So what I'm trying to say here is everybody must decide for themselves on everything what is the right or wrong of the matter. And overriding everything, whatever you feel is right or wrong on every particular issue, what is most important, what sits above all of that, is that you use your own mind, your own conscience, your own heart and your own soul to make those decisions. And that these players on stage, these characters who, as we always do, when you meet them in real life, you say, oh, he's not really like he is in public. He's more like this, or she's more like that. Or did you know that she's, oftentimes like people say, did you know that she's actually really nasty in real life? She projects such a lovely persona on TV. She seems taller, or he seems taller, but he's really small. This kind of stuff. So we know that there is a difference between the character and the person. So what I'd like you to do is keep a hold of your emotions, keep a tight rein on them. Don't allow your emotions to be drawn out of you so easily. But most of all, and again, this is not an appeal to centrism, most of all, please do not align yourself so ardently with one of these characters that it causes you to separate and to alienate yourself from otherwise good people who are in the audience just like you.